So we're not going to have a very long introduction, I'm sure. Everyone is familiar with our beloved teacher, Moulana Masrur Rylands. So without further ado, inshallah, I'll hand over to him. فليتفضل مشكور.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم رب يسر وأعن وتمم بالخير يا فتاح أما بعد فالسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, we thank and praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the ni'mah of being in a mosque, for having the ni'mah and the privilege of utilizing our masajid, where people in many parts of the world are deprived of this ni'mah. More so, we are sitting in a dars of ilm. And our ulama say, Ibn Raslan rahimahullah ta'ala says, وَالْعِلْمُ أَسْنَ سَائِرِ الْأَعْمَالِ فَهُوَ دَلِيلُ الْخَيْرِ وَالْأَفْضَالِ. Says the best of actions is learning, acquiring knowledge. The best of action. That's not an overstatement. It's not an exaggeration. We know that in lugha, in language, you get something called mubalagha, where you exaggerate something to emphasize a meaning or to emphasize a point. When our ulama was saying, وَالْعِلْمُ أَسْنَ سَائِرِ الْأَعْمَالِ, there's no exaggeration whatsoever. Mubalagha is not intended. This is literally a masala in fiqh, that the best of actions is acquiring knowledge. The best of fard actions is acquiring fard knowledge. What's fard knowledge? It's fard for me to know how to take wudu. It's fard for me to know how to make salah. It's fard for me to know what breaks the wudu. It's fard for me to know what breaks the salah, etc., etc. There are fard kifaya in knowledge. The details of trading, commerce, the details of, while we all know riba is haram, but the details of that, we are not obliged every single Muslim to know. So there is something called fard ayn in knowledge that every single Muslim ought to know. There is something called fard kifaya that a group of Muslims studying, knowing this section of knowledge absolves everyone else from learning. There is something called nawafil in knowledge as well. So when our ulama say, وَالْعِلْمُ أَسْنَ سَائِرِ الْأَعْمَالِ, that ilm, studying, acquiring knowledge, which we are currently doing, is the best of action. They mean out of all fard actions. So listen to the statement, out of all fard actions, salah, hajj, which we know these are virtuous deeds, and we revere these deeds. We show reverence to this. We magnify these deeds. Hajj is a major thing in the life of a Muslim. Salah is a major thing in the life of a Muslim. Jumu'ah is a major thing in the life of a Muslim. Despite all these fard acts, the most virtuous of all acts is acquiring knowledge, is acquiring fard knowledge. The most virtuous of all nawafil acts is acquiring knowledge that is nafil. What is nafil knowledge? The details of certain things, or certain sections in our fiqh, or certain sciences that is not obligatory upon every single Muslim to know. It's nawafil, it's considered extra. The best of all, if I were to choose now, let's assume that this is nafil, ilm that we are studying here. If someone were to choose to perform 2 raka'at or 20 raka'at salah from maghrib until isha in this period, and we are sitting here learning nawafil ilm, this is considered more virtuous than the 2 raka'at. That is what they mean when they say the acquisition of knowledge is the most virtuous of all actions. So we thank and praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to sit in the masajid. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to acquire ilm. It's only through the acquisition of knowledge, through the increase of knowledge, that we preserve deen. Deen cannot be preserved through any other means. Otherwise, with the lack of knowledge, deen just becomes about my feelings. We always know that there's only one Allah. We always know that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that's what makes us Muslim. But beyond that, then is then subject to my feelings. What I feel is right and what I feel is wrong. And that is why so much emphasis is placed on acquiring knowledge. Because acquiring knowledge, what is halal and what is haram, is solely what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam makes halal and makes haram. And ultimately, it's through our knowledge that the implementation and the application comes about. The application and the implementation is a result of knowledge. So there cannot be any fruits, right? There cannot be any action, there cannot be any implementation or application if there's no knowledge. I'm trying to emphasize the point that we are extremely fortunate that every single second, minute that we are sitting here up until the waqt of Isha is going to be counted in my favor. Alright? So we thank and praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity. I personally actually also, before continuing, like to thank the committee and the imamat and specifically Sheikh Omar, Moulana Omar, for the opportunity, because the reality is Sheikh Omar will be taking over the durus from next week, but he gave me the opportunity to open, and I said, Sheikh, you have a copy of the book, you're more than capable of conducting the class, but I feel very honored that he asked me to at least do the opening to the class. So I thank him for the opportunity, and I thank everyone present for the opportunity. What are we doing? We are doing a book called Ifadatul Muntabih bi Ahkami wa Sunani wa Adabi Tajhiz al Mawta wa ma yata'allaq bih. Long name. We are doing a book called the Ahkam, the rulings, the Sunan, the etiquette of preparing the Janazah or the Mawta and everything that is attached to it. Now, why is this book so significant? Why was this book chosen out of all the fiqh books that there are out there? I would like to disclose that information. First and foremost, out of all the other fiqh books that we have out there, it's quite long, it's not necessarily conducive for the sitting that we have here, or the type of setting that we have here, while this book is compiled by Muhammad, a female scholar, student of Deen from Yemen. So I don't want to go into that topic, but I'm specifically mentioning that so in the hope that our females take inspiration from this, that this is a female, as we are speaking now, probably putting her children to bed, having 5 children nagging on her head, but we are sitting in the southernmost tip of Africa in a mosque, benefiting from a book that she wrote. Right? So she's doing her house chores, and she's a student of Deen at the same time, and she authored something so nice, so brilliant, so concise, so beneficial, that people are benefiting from this book all around the world. She's a Yemeni female. So the thing about females are when they set their minds onto something, then can ons gaat slaap. When the females set their minds to something, if a female sets her mind to tazkiyah, to purification of her heart, then we're going to struggle to keep up with her. When a female sets her mind to her academic achievements, then we struggle to keep up with them. So I mentioned that the author of this book is a female, hoping that our females take inspiration from this bi'idhnillah tabarak wa ta'ala to do similar work, inshallah. Ameen. Why this book though? This book, what she did was, she kept, first of all, she listed all the fundamental ahkam. So many of the men sitting here, how many janazahs did we attend? I mean, we can't count, we can't track how many janazahs we attended. So a lot of the ahkam we are familiar with through the experience and just being present at the janazah. So we've picked up ahkam. The difficulty with that is you don't know what's wajib from what's sunnah from what's, and it's necessary to know the difference. If a sunnah act is left out, the validity still stands of any action. If the fard act or rukn is left out, whether it's of salah or something else, the validity of the act is suspended. The act is incomplete. So it's necessary to know the details. So first and foremost, despite the fact that we attended so many janazahs, I bet if we were to mention some ahkam now, it will actually cause some curiosity in the brothers. Like for example, many of us, we've experienced coming late for salah. So we know how to build on. What happens when you come late for janazah salah? There's no first raka'at, second raka'at, third raka'at. as takbir, the first takbir, the second takbir, do you build on as a masbuk in that? Right? That's just one masala, just to spark the curiosity in the brothers. The second thing is what? Another masala that comes to mind, a female who has a miscarriage. At what do you do with the miscarriage, with the child? At what point do you have a full-on ghusl, kafan, janazah salah? What dua do you make for an infant or for a child who's sinless? Perhaps that came up before, wallahu a'lam. But those are interesting masail to think about, right? Then the ahkam on the miscarriage itself, in and of itself, it depends on the circumstance, whether the child was a miscarriage at 1 month, at 2 months, at 3 months, passing 6-month period, and the rulings and the actions are going to differ depending on that information, right? And many other masail that come that will be mentioned here, that perhaps through all the 100 janazas that I attended, I still didn't come across that masala. So it's really an opportunity. Knowledge is the most beautiful thing. Wallahi al-azim, knowledge is the most beautiful thing. When we done studying this book, and I urge everyone next week to come with a pen and a book. Nobody's going to test anyone. You don't have to feel nervous. But it's your own. I see the sheikh at the back has a pen and a book, but that's a student of deen. That's a student of deen. It doesn't come without a pen and a book. Because the reality is, whatever masail that's going to be mentioned here, I should be documenting, making document or notes of, for my own benefit. The next time a masala comes up, I can check my notes. The idea is what? The idea is an increase of knowledge. The idea is that in every circumstance, I know how to worship Allah. That is why fiqh is so important. Some people think maybe it's just an idea among students of deen. I don't know if it extends beyond that also. But some people have the impression that fiqh is void of spirituality. What I've learned from some scholars is that there's no way you're going to gain closeness to Allah without fiqh. We believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but fiqh is the do's and the don'ts. I'm only going to gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when I'm executing the wajib action that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made wajib upon me. I'm only going to gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when I avoid the prohibition that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered that I abstain from. If I do not know what the wajibat are, if I do not know what the muharramat are, how do I abstain and how do I implement? We see what happens then is that you find individuals, you find people that are really in love with the deen. They really love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They really love the implementation of the deen. But they are falling into actions inadvertently, ignorantly, that is prohibited. Right? That is prohibited. So, knowledge of what is wajib and knowledge of what is haram, so that I may implement what is wajib and so that I may refrain from what is haram in every instance of my life, that's the only way I gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Beyond that, in addition to that is my adhkar. The cherry on top is my adhkar and all of those ibadat and extra nawafil that I have. But at the basis, the solid foundation that's going to be the stepping stone for me gaining closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is implementing those things that are wajib and refraining at all costs from those things that are haram. So fiqh is by no means void of any spirituality. You don't need a second dose. Though, why do I mention that? In literature, our scholars have often documented them separately. And perhaps this is where the misconception comes from. And they've documented it separately for a reason, right? So we have books that's written on the virtues of salah. What's the virtues of salah? What is the inward actions of salah? We know the outward actions of salah. That's our fiqh. The fact that I know takbiratul ihram is a rukn, surah Fatiha is a rukn, my ruku' is a rukn. My intention first of all was also a rukn. My ruku' is a rukn. My i'tidal, nobody decides, you know what, my back is sore, I'm going to remain in qiyam, and when you go in sujood, I'll just go straight down, I'm not going to do the ruku' today. Because I know my salah is going to be invalid. So that is fiqh. But then separately documented is what? Is the inward actions of salah. What's the inward state when I'm standing in qiyam and reciting Surah Fatiha? What's the inward state when I'm standing in ruku and praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What's the inward state, etc., etc., etc.? What should my mindset and my mind space be before salah, during salah, and after salah? These are things that are documented. We generally discuss the fiqh to ensure the validity of everyone's salah, and then we don't go beyond that to discuss what is the inward state of to ensure. So let me put it this way. Your fiqh, our fiqh guarantees us the validity of the salah. Our inward state and our intention guarantees us the acceptance of salah. And there's a difference. My salah can be completely valid. I'm using salah as an example, but it applies to anything else. My action can be completely valid, given that all the shurut, all the prerequisites and the arkan were met, but I did so to show off, or I did so to look pious, by way of example, right? Allah knows my intention, what's going on in my heart and in my mind. So outwardly, I've met all the requirements of the action, whether it's hajj or salah or sawm or anything else. I've met all the outward requirements, but inwardly, there was some disease of the heart, right? I did it because my father was going to scold as a youngster maybe. Or I did it because I wanted to look pious. Or I did it for whatever the case may be. So our fiqh guarantees us the validity. Our tazkiyah, our inward state, guarantees us the acceptance by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What's beautiful about this book is that she brought both together. Right? So this book deals with very important masail. This book deals with these important masail in a very concise, brief manner, yet not so brief that you lose the essence of the discussion or of the point. So the brevity is there, number one. She touches on all the masail, number two. And number three, she brings in the most important part. You know, I can attend the janazah, I can do a ghusl and everything, and then it doesn't affect me in the least. Perhaps the first janazah I attended, the first time I saw it affected me. Some of us might have memories, of moments when attending a janazah or being in a maqbara that just sparked thinking way beyond this dunya. That you realize your mortality, you realize that you're not going to be those things are there. But the threat is still there that all those things become mechanical. And for that reason, we need to remind ourselves of the inward states when attending a janazah. How do I prepare for a janazah? How do I prepare for death myself? And that's her opening chapter. Her opening chapter is not dealing with the mayyit as a third person. How do I, as a first person, prepare for death? That's her opening chapter. And later on, we're going to get to how to deal with the mayyit, how to do the ghusl as a third person. So I'm doing the ghusl. But her very opening chapter is how do I, as an individual, as a first person, prepare for death? Right? So, last thing I'll mention before we continue and actually open with the first chapter is, I was thinking, Ramadan is around the corner. I was thinking, why did you ask me to teach a book on Janazah? But then I realized one of the best ways to prepare. What do we want in Ramadan? What we want in Ramadan is transformation. What we want in Ramadan is improvement. Improvement in the month of Ramadan by an increase of good actions, everyone can do. And this Imam Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala mentions very clearly in Minhaj al-Abidin or in Bidayat al-Hidayah. Imam Ghazali mentions very clear, every single Muslim is able to increase in good action. It's the truthful and the sincere one with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that leaves off the bad action. Right? So, in preparation for Ramadan, even if I don't increase in good, if I've left the bad, I'm successful. If I've increased in 10 good actions, but I still have my same bad habits, then it's questionable. Alright? So what we really want as transformation, is leaving off bad slowly but surely. The Prophet ﷺ said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran as well, those things that the Prophet ﷺ prohibited, commanded you with, do it to the best of your ability. Those things that the Prophet ﷺ commanded you with, leave it off altogether. Right? When it came to doing good, the command is what? Do it to the best of your ability. When it came to leaving bad, the command is what? Leave it off altogether. No question about it. Leave it off altogether. The good you can increase gradually. The bad you leave off altogether. So, without further ado, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. قال المصنف رحمه الله تعالى نفعنا الله بعلومها في الدارين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فيما يندب للمسلم فعله قبل الوفاة. Those things that are encouraged, mandub, mustahab, highly recommended that a Muslim implements before death. And the first thing she mentions is ذكره للموت في سائر أوقاته. That he remembers death in every part of his life, in every part of his day, that he remembers death. Why? This seems like a very pessimistic outlook in life, that I must think whole day about death. That's not the reality. When we're thinking of death, when we realize our mortality constantly, it's very difficult to be deluded by the dunya. When we forget our mortality, and I act as if I'm going to live forever, then it's very easy to be deluded by the dunya. So what does she say? She says, لِأَنَّ ذِكْرَ الْمَوْتِ, because the remembrance of death, زَاجِرٌ لَهُ عَنِ الْمَعَاصِي, prevents the individual from sin. And this is a very important point. Our ulama mention one. They say, when shaitan, we have two things that's constantly attacking us. Number one is the nafs, and number two is shaitan. We do have the threat of the delusion of this dunya and the so-called raj of this dunya, but what's really attacking us, full on attacking us, constantly, number one is the nafs, and number two is shaitan. We know how to get rid of shaitan. Getting rid of shaitan, well, let me put it this way. How do you know when shaitan is attacking you and when your nafs is attacking you? How do we know when shaitan is attacking us and when our nafs is attacking us? When shaitan is attacking us, when I get a bad thought or a bad idea prompting me to do something bad, when it's coming from shaitan, by mere remembrance of Allah, by dhikr, the thought will subside, the urge will subside, shaitan will flee. This is guaranteed. This comes in Quran, this comes in Hadith, this is not my words. Shaitan will flee and you will feel stronger, composed, the urge gone. How do I know it's my nafs? When the urge is there, dhikr at this point in time will not help. The only thing that is going to subside that urge when it's coming from the nafs is remembrance of death. A true remembrance of death. Right? A true remembrance of death. The remembrance of death will make a true remembrance of death. I'm not talking about attending a Janazah and talking about Manchester United. That's not remembrance of death. That happens at the maghrieb. Standing there, the guy's busy putting someone in there, and this guy's talking about who lost in the soccer. So clearly, there's a problem there. I'm talking about the real remembrance of death, where I realize my mortality. Let me give you an example. Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala speaks about sin and whether sin is worth it. Let's just compare whether sin is worth it. So Imam Ghazali says, what's the consequences of your sin? Number one, when you sin, it closes the doors to khair. We don't know what awaiting us in the future. Perhaps there's an opportunity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was going to open up for me in the future. Perhaps this fath, meaning is in the sense of a spiritual fath, right? A spiritual opening that I just feel the stronger connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I just enjoy my ibadah more. That's a spiritual fath. I get enjoyment out of my salah. I get genuine enjoyment out of the recitation of Quran. That's a spiritual fath. By sinning, the first thing that happens is that those doors to khair is closed. That's the first thing that happens. Imam Ghazali is speaking about what? The consequences of sin. Is sin worth it? The first thing that happens is those doors to khair is closed. The second thing that happens is what? I face humiliation and disgrace on this dunya before the akhirah. If someone is persistent in sin, eventually Allah exposes him. So I face, Allah save us. So I face humiliation and disgrace on this dunya before the akhirah. So the repercussions of my sin is already active. I think it's just the adhab and I just need to make quick tawbah before death, even though I don't know when death is. No, the repercussions for my sin has started already. Number one, you're deprived of khair. Whether that khair be material, whether that khair be monetary, whether that khair be a spiritual fath that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the individual, that's the first thing I'm deprived of. Secondly, humiliation on this dunya. Thirdly, he says, adhab in the qabr. Now, a moment of adhab in the qabr doesn't compare to a 10-minute sin, a 20-minute sin, a half an hour sin, an hour sin. What is it in comparison when you are alone in that grave, in that dark grave, all your family is gone, all your wealth is gone, nothing else matters, it's just you and your deeds. And punishment comes. Was that 10 minutes sin worth it? Fifth rather, you have to stand in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of Qiyamah after being resurrected from your qabr and answer to those sins, and your fate will now be decided. Shaykh Ghazali is saying there are several repercussions for your sin. Right? There are several repercussions for your sin. Is it really worth it? So when we speak about the reflection of death, when we speak about the reflection of death that is going to extinguish that urge for sin, we're talking about the true reflection of death, where I realize my mortality, where I realize the amount of years I have left, where I realize that I will be forgotten by my family and friends, when I realize that it's just me and my deeds, when I realize that the year after is forever. A true reflection of death will immediately extinguish any type of urge for any sin. So she says, what is encouraged, mandub, mustahab, highly recommended for every Muslim to do is constantly remember death. It's not a pessimistic outlook in life, it's seeing reality for what it is. I cannot be deluded if I know I'm going to die. Alright? You can still enjoy life, still enjoy family, you can still enjoy whatever it is we enjoy, that's halal, but I'm not deluded thinking that this is going to last forever. Hanging on, attaching my heart to these things unnecessarily, which cause ramifications and other problems, consequences that comes from it. The second thing about remembering death is what? وَدَاعٍ لَهُ إِلَى فِعْلِ الطَّاعَاتِ. Automatically I feel the need to do good. Right? وَقَدْ أَمَرَ بِذَلِكَ النَّبِيُّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ بِقَوْلِهِ أَكْثِرُوا مِنْ ذِكْرِ هَذِمِ اللَّذَّاتِ الْمَوْتِ. This advice that she's giving is derived from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where the Prophet ﷺ says, be excessive in your remembrance of what? The Prophet didn't say maut, he described maut. He gave maut a description. He said, be excessive in your remembrance of the cutter of all pleasures. Right? In this dunya, by our very nature as human beings, we strive for comfort. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You want to be a little bit more comfortable. Whether it's in your workspace, whether it's in your house space, whether it's what you eat, whether it is an aircon, whatever the case may be. It's difficult to live when you're suffering. It's difficult to be productive when you're suffering. So by our very nature, we try to be more comfortable, constantly. The threat that comfort has is that you become attached to it. And this becomes the standard and I can't have it any other way. And that is potentially when the dunya creeps in. How do we rid ourselves from that? Strive for comfort, but rid ourselves from our hearts being attached to the dunya. أَكْثِرُوا مِنْ ذِكْرِ هَذِمِ اللَّذَّاتِ. Constantly remember the cutter of all pleasures. Those things that we are striving for of comfort will be cut either suddenly or we will be given notice, but it will be cut nonetheless. So the Prophet ﷺ advises us, make excessive remembrance of the cutter of all pleasures. The Prophet ﷺ is also reported to have said, كَفَى بِالْمَوْتِ وَعِظًا. كَفَى بِالْمَوْتِ وَعِظًا. Death is sufficient of a reminder. death should be sufficient as a reminder. نعم. وفي الإكثار من ذكر الموت واستشعار قرب نزوله فوائد جليلة ومنافع كثيرة منها. There are numerous positive consequences of excessive remembrance of death. Number one, she says, الزهد في الدنيا والقناعة باليسير منها. That you have complete zuhd from this dunya and that you are satisfied with whatever you have. Zuhd from this dunya doesn't mean I have to wear tattered and torn clothing. Zuhd from this dunya doesn't mean I can't save money. Alright? Zuhd from this dunya means that while saving money, my heart is not attached to the money. Zuhd from this dunya means while I'm wearing a nice stove, my heart is not attached to the stove. Zuhd from this dunya means that my wealth is in my hand and not in my heart. So by remembering death, I'm going to deal with these things that they ought to be. I'm using this for a purpose, I'm using that for a purpose, I'm using my wealth for a purpose, I'm using that for a purpose. But never does my heart get involved. Right? Why? Because of excessive remembrance of where I'm eventually, if not suddenly, going to end up. The second thing is ملازمة الأعمال الصالحة التي هي زاد الآخرة. The second benefit of remembering death is what? That you will constantly be, it will be easy for us to be consistent on good a'mal, which is the provision for the year after. The currency in the year after is our a'mal, salihah. There's nothing else for us to trade with. For me to trade my salvation, for me to trade something for my Jannah, I can only do so with a'mal. There's no other currency. Right? So the second benefit of constantly remembering this is that you will mulazamatul a'mal salihah, you will find it easier to be consistent in good, no matter how little it is. Allati hiya zadul akhirah, that is ultimately the provision of the year after. Mujanabatu sayyi'at wal mukhalafat, and this is what we just mentioned a moment ago. It will be easy to abstain from evil and sin. There's nothing that will rid the urge to a sin like a true remembrance of my mortality. And lastly, al-mubadara bit-tawbati ila Allah ta'ala subhanahu wa ta'ala, that I will hasten with tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first thing she mentioned and recommended to do before in preparation for death is remembering death. The things we listed now is the consequence, the benefits of remembering death. The second thing, before we get to the second thing, this is a beautiful one. تهوين سكرات الموت كما في الحديث. Excessive remembrance of death makes the sakaratul maut at the time of death easy on the individual. And this is really something we want to strive for. Right? How did we come to that conclusion? كما في الحديث, as stated in the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. أكثروا من ذكر الموت, be excessive in the remembrance of death. فما من عبد أكثر ذكره, for there is no slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that's excessive in his remembrance of death, إلا أحيا الله قلبه. Firstly, except that Allah will revive his heart. وهون عليه الموت, and Allah will make death easy upon him. Right? Two benefits mentioned in the hadith. Number one, Allah will revive the heart of the individual. This is the spiritual heart, obviously. وَهَوَّنَ عَلَيْهِ الْمَوْتِ, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make death easy for him. The sakaratul maut will become easy for the individual. وَفِي نِسْيَانِ ذِكْرِ الْمَوْتِ وَيُطَالَةِ الْأَمَلِ أَفْضَلُ. Now, and then she's going to mention a number of things as the negatives of forgetting death. Right? Meaning you have too much hope in the dunya, you hope for too many things. Your hope exceeds your lifespan. The second thing she mentions that the Muslim ought to do in preparation for death is al-isti'adad lil-maut wa at-ta'ahhub lahu, is that he prepares for death, he ensures that his preparation, that he's ready for death. He ensures that he is ready for death. One of the pious predecessors were asked, if you knew that you were going to, actually two incidences come to mind. The first is, one of the pious predecessors said, if you knew you were going to die within the next 24 hours, I don't know the time period that was stipulated, but it was very short, whether it was an hour or 24 hours, what would you change? He said nothing. He said nothing. Every day he lives as if it's his last day. Again, it's not a pessimistic outlook in life, that I'm filled with anxiety. In fact, the contrary to that, the opposite is true. When I forget death, I'm filled with anxiety, right? And the stress of this world. When I realize that the difficulty of this world is temporary, coming to an end, relief will come, reward will come for my difficulty and my challenges, I'm more relieved than anything else. So it's not a pessimistic outlook in life. So what does the scholar say? He says if he knew that he was going to die within the next 24 hours, there's nothing he would change. Because every day he wakes up making tawbah. Every day he strives to ensure that he does what is obligatory upon him. Every day he ensures that he abstains from what he's supposed to abstain from. He's ready. He's ready. Just the other day we lost Moulana Athmani, rahimahullah ta'ala, which I know this community is very familiar with. Someone of Moulana Mu'adh's family was telling me that of Moulana Mu'adh's passing. And they were saying that in hospital, he was reciting his kalima the entire time. There were family members around him. And I think he was just waiting on one other family member. I think it was his daughter. Whoever it may have been, there was one family member that was still to arrive. Upon her arrival, he was reciting his kalima, La ilaha illallah. And Moulana Mu'adh's last words was, I'm ready. He recited his kalima, La ilaha, and he passed away. That was witnessed by his family. Right? Al-isti'adad al-maut. One of the beautiful things that my father said was that Moulana Mu'adh worked for that death. That death wasn't just granted to him. He worked for that death. My father knows him from Darul Uloom days. He was always, my father calls him a dhakir of Allah, someone who's constantly remembering Allah. Right? That death was worked for. What's the second thing that she recommends a Muslim does in preparation for death? Is that he actually prepares for death. How? وَيَكُونُ ذَلِكَ بِفِعْلِ الْأَعْمَالِ الصَّالِحَةِ وَاجْتِنَابِ الْأَعْمَالِ الْقَبِيحَةِ وَالْمُبَادَرَةِ بِالتَّوْبَةِ وَرَدِّ الْمَظَالِمِ إِلَى أَهْلِهَا وَالْإِنَابَ وَالرُّجُوعِ إِلَى اللَّهِ. What do you do in preparation? I want to prepare for this. I'm eager. How do I go about it? She says, number one, ensure that you have good deeds in your life. Gradually. What we want is longevity, consistency, istiqamah. I don't want to implement so much good deeds that I burn out next week and then I'm back to stage one. Right? I want to gradually increase in my khair so that it ensures the longevity of my journey. In 20 years from now, I want to say, I'm still reciting this surah after maghrib since 20 years ago. That's what I want. Right? So, the first, in preparation for death, ensure that you have good deeds in your life. Number two, وَاجْتِنَابُ الْأَعْمَالِ الْقَبِيحَةِ. Abstain at all costs from any filthy actions, any sins. وَالْمُبَادَرَ بِالتَّوْبَةِ. Hasten towards tawbah. رَدِّ الْمَظَالِمِ إِلَىٰ أَهْلِهَا. Whatever I owe people, whether it's an apology. When I say I owe people, we always think of money. Maybe I just owe the guy an apology. Whatever I owe people, I return to the rightful owners whatever is due to them. And then what do? So let's say we did all that. That we can do in a day. I make niyyah now, I'm going to implement one good deed. I'm going to rid myself from whatever sins there are. I'm going to make tawbah tonight, immediately. I'm going to return whatever it is that I need to give to that person, that person, that person. These are the intentions I have. What do I do from here on? Ar-ruju' wal-inaba ila Allah ta'ala, subhanahu wa ta'ala, constantly. Always have this inward directedness towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this inclination towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all of my states. If my inward is directed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, constantly, everything else follows. If my inward is not directed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sincerely and constantly, it's very difficult. The a'mal salihah just becomes a burden. It's difficult to keep up with these a'mal. It's difficult to be consistent because the heart is in a different space. The heart is directed to something else. So after implementing khair, after abstaining from whatever bad, after hastening to tawbah, after returning whatever I have, I need to its their rightful owners, I ensure that I have this constant inner directedness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I try my utmost best to maintain that. the second incident that I forgot to mention was Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala was asked, if you have an hour to live, what would you spend doing it? He said, acquiring knowledge, which we are currently doing, alhamdulillah. Then they said, even if you can't implement it, because you have an hour to live, you're going to study for an hour and then die. What's your knowledge going to benefit you? He said, the acquisition of the knowledge is better than the implementation. He's not saying be a munafiq. He's saying, in a scale of virtue and reward, the mere acquisition of knowledge in and of itself is a good deed. It's not that I'm acquiring the knowledge, now I have to go and do good deeds. Your acquisition of knowledge now, as we are sitting here, is considered a good deed. Right? So he said, if you had an hour left to live, what would you spend doing it? He said, spend it in study and in learning the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She brings a number of ahadith. Do I go through them all? وَلَمَّا سُئِلَ صَلَوَاتُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَامُهُ عَنِ الْأَكْيَاسِ مِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ هُمْ. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked about who's the akyas amongst the people, who's the intelligent amongst the people, so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam responded by saying, أَكْثَرُهُمْ لِلْمَوْتِ ذِكْرًا, the one who remembers death the most. وَأَحْسَنُهُمْ لَهُ إِسْتِعْدَادًا, not just mere remembrance, and the one who prepares best. أُولَٰئِكَ الْأَكْيَاسِ, these are considered the intelligent ones, the rational ones. ذهبوا, listen to this, subhanallah, ذهبوا بشرف الدنيا وكرامة الآخرة, they've left with the good of this world and the year after. The one who remembers, excessive in remembrance, this is not my words, this is the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We are obliged to believe in it. The one who is excessive in remembrance of death and prepares adequately for death, ذهبوا هؤلاء أولئك الأكياس. That's the first thing the Prophet said. These are the intelligent ones. ذهبوا بشرف الدنيا, they've left with the sharaf of this dunya, the honor and the good of this dunya. وكرامة الآخرة, and they have the honor in the year after as well. If we want the best of both worlds, we can have the best of both worlds. They say you can't have the best of both, you can have the best of both worlds by the recipe that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave us. وفي صحيح البخاري عن ابن عمر رضي الله تعالى عنه قال أخذ رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بمنكبي فقال كن في الدنيا كأنك غريب وعبد السبيل. This is a famous hadith. Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the son of Sayyidina Umar, he said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam took me by my shoulders and said, be in this, meaning he's grabbing my attention. And he says, kun fi dunya, be in this dunya, ka'annaka gharibun, as if you are a stranger, a foreigner. A stranger is never comfortable. Doesn't make it, when you're at home, you're at home. A stranger, a foreigner is never comfortable, right? Too comfortable. Or abiru sabil, or like a traveler. Rasulullah's advice to him was, be like a traveler. Take what you need and go. Right? Don't put up camp. وكان ابن عمر يقول إذا أمسيت, Sayyidina Umar Ibn Umar, the son of Sayyidina Umar, used to say, when you have reached the evening, we've currently reached the evening, فلا تنتظر الصباح, don't wait for the morning, don't expect the morning. وإذا أصبحت, and when you've entered into the morning, فلا تنتظر المساء, don't expect to see the evening. وخذ من صحتك لمرضك ومن حياتك لموتك. Utilize your health now before illness, and utilize your life now before death. Right? That is in preparation for death. And then the last thing, there were two things we mentioned, just to summarize. I'm going to end off now, inshallah. The last thing she mentions is what? The first thing she mentioned was what? Excessive remembrance. The second thing she mentioned was what? Preparation, actual planning, like proper planning, like sitting with a page and a pen. How am I going to plan this out? Right, like a real planning, not like, inshallah, maak my neer om 'n goeie boetie te wees and whatever. No. Proper planning, right? The last thing she mentions is what? Al-wasiyah. The wasiyah is your will, right? The last thing she mentions, and there is a hadith on this actually. Now, man mata ala wasiyatin mata ala sabilin wa sunnah. وَمَاتَ عَلَى تُقًى وَالشَّهَادَةِ وَمَاتَ مَغْفُورًا لَهُ. Amin ya Rabb. Whomsoever dies with his wasiyah sorted, he has died upon the sunnah, he's died upon taqwa, he's died upon the shahada, وَمَاتَ مَغْفُورًا لَهُ, and he has died forgiven. Subhanallah. So the third thing she recommends for us in preparation for death is the wasiyah. I'm going to send Sheikh Omar, inshallah, a PDF of a wasiyah, a very nice wasiyah that was actually I don't know if Habib Omar wrote it, but he read through it and edited. I think he edited the wasiyah, and then Sheikh can maybe translate it. I would love for everyone to get a copy of this wasiyah and just read through it. What the wasiyah says is, I need to fill my name in. I, Masrur, hereby, whatever, make my wasiyah before getting to all my material things and all my wealth and all of those things. What am I making wasiyah of in this wasiyah? It's beautiful. I make wasiyah to these individuals to ensure that when I die, when Sakaratul Maut is there, that they recite the kalima la ilaha illallah by my side. That when I leave this dunya, they close my eyes and they face me towards the qibla. That when I leave this dunya, they perform the ghusl upon the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That they utilize it. Before I get all my wealth, this is what the wasiyah is saying. Right? When we think about the world, we think about finance. Before we get to all of those things, the first thing the wasiyah is saying is, I'm making wasiyah to these individuals that are around me at the time of my death to please ensure that my janazah is executed upon the sunnah. From the moment of my death, that you turn me towards the qibla, that you recite Surah Yasin, etc., etc. All of those virtues will come into this book, will come in this book. The virtues, the masail, everything will come in this book. So the wasiyah is of utmost importance. If nothing else attracts us to the wasiyah, what should attract us is this hadith. Man mata ala wasiyah, mata ala sunnah. Whomsoever dies and his wasiyah is sorted, he dies upon the sunnah, he dies upon taqwa, he dies upon shahada, wa mata maghfuran lahu, and he dies forgiven. He dies forgiven. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to execute what we firstly learned tonight. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow death to be a reality for us. Death was a reality to the Anbiya, to the Sahaba, to the awliya, to the scholars, and they were the happiest of people. Right? They had the concern and the worry for the hidayah of everyone. They did have that concern, but it didn't make them morbid. They were crying at night for people. They were crying at night for their own sins. They were crying at night for guidance. Yes, but there's an enjoyment when you turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? There's a contentment when you turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It didn't make them more morbid. You will never find a pious person, someone who's conscious of Allah, depressed and morbid. Only someone who's distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'm not speaking about clinical depression, all this, that's a different discussion altogether. I'm not denying the reality of those things. I'm just talking about being pessimistic and down and morbid. Anyone who's close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in your crying, in your dua is an enjoyment. In your crying, in your dua is a satisfaction. In your crying, in your dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, crying there doesn't mean misery. Crying there allows a certain amount of contentment in the heart of the individual. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to remember death. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to prepare for death. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us to fulfill our wasiyah and to die as Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentioned, ala sunnah, upon the sunnah, upon taqwa, upon shahada, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us as the hadith mentioned. I don't know, we probably have how many time for I don't know if there are any questions. We can take questions inshallah. What time is it? 5 minutes now. We can take questions, and then that is literally the end of the chapter. I wouldn't like to start a new chapter and then end in 2 minutes time. Sheikh can do the honors inshallah. If there are any questions, then we can take the questions. If not, then we can back to the inshallah. So inshallah for next week, Sheikh can just remind the Jama'ah that everyone, I encourage everyone to attend with a book and a pen. And through my notes, I just found out recently that the Zawiya in Wendesday has a library at the mosque. In the library are some books and manuscripts of Moulana Rahimahullah Ta'ala's grandfather. What am I saying? What I'm saying is my notes of knowledge might be a benefit to someone else coming after me. Right? If my notes is thorough enough, I could even compile something of this nature and have people benefit from it, whether in my lifetime or after my life, even if it's just my children, benefit from it. It's important that we distinguish duroos such as this, lessons such as this, from our Friday khutbah. When we come in for Friday khutbah, we are coming for some nasiha, some guidance, some spirituality. We're coming to fulfill the obligation of being the Jummah as wajib. It would be nice if I attend with a book and a pen, but it's not necessary for me to. But duroos of this nature, I can't forget one. When we mention the ahkam of something, the sunan of something, the arkan of something, I can't forget one of it. Right? My action, the validity of my action is dependent on that. So it's important that duroos of this nature, especially fiqh, that we attend with a book and a pen, and we make notes, inshallah. The more thorough our notes are, the more we're sitting in classes, the more notes we are making, the more we are accumulating, the more we stand the chance of authoring something and allowing it to be as a sadaqatul jariyah for those to come. And this is the sunnah of the scholars of the past. Many of the books authored wasn't intended for publication. It was literally the study notes. The hawashi that we have in fiqh and all of these marginal notes. Our scholars would sit and make marginal notes. But their notes were so thorough that those books were then published. So we're sitting with hawashi, we're sitting with a book, and on the side there's another book Sheikh Abu Bakr has in his library, in his office as well. Some of the hawashi of Ibn Qasim and Sharwani, that was marginal notes of their notes when sitting in duroos that they took, but it was so good and so thorough that they decided to publish it. People after their demise decided to publish it. So we should revive this, inshallah, in our society where we are. That we revive this scholarly approach to the duroos. If there are no questions, then we end there. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallah wa bihamdihi. Oh, there is a question, sorry. So the very next chapter deals with the will. Now, in detail, meaning how do I execute the will, whatever. It's not too much detail, but it's enough for me to do so efficiently. And then I'll send Sheikh the PDF of the will so we can print it and we can give everyone a copy, inshallah ta'ala, so that I can just fill my name. Before I even understand the entire will, literally just fill your name in. So that if I die that same night, alhamdulillah, my wasiyah sorted, and bi'idhnillah, I'm forgiven. But the will is the very next chapter. The will is the very next chapter before getting to the ahkam of the janazah itself. No, but I mean this will come in the ahkam. But it's recommended to take wudu. Meaning the wudu isn't broken. But if I remember correctly, it would be makruh to perform salah like that. But the wudu is still valid. Keep in mind that everything that this female student or scholar is discussing is strictly according to the Shafi'i madhab. So I don't know what the other madhab are saying, about it. Everything we discuss here is strictly according to the Shafi'i madhab. But those details will come, inshallah. Okay. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallah wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alhamdulillah, we say Jazakumullah khairan to Moulana Masrur for that very inspiring class and very informative class, alhamdulillah, about the preparation of our own janazah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those that will prepare for our death that we make that change, because we are on the doorstep of Ramadan. It is literally around the corner. It is right on our doorstep. So may we make that change now, inshallah. And may we become of those people that will constantly remember and think of death, inshallah. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless Moulana Masrur in this life and the next, and grant him all the khairat and barakat for taking his time out, because he don't like I must speak about his accolades, but he's a very studious person, alhamdulillah, and he's somebody that whenever you phone him, he doesn't even answer our calls. When his friends call him, he doesn't answer, because he's always in the class, if it's online or whether it's in person. And we ask Allah subhanahu, and we'd like to thank him from our hearts for taking his time out and coming here and sharing some valuable information with us. And may he join us again very soon, inshallah, maybe next week. I'll try this coming week and toast this arm, inshallah. Maybe I succeed, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.